Welcome, everybody, in the Off the Ball Network fandom and beyond to a special late night Veterans Day edition, when we're recording this, of the Bunts and Bruises podcast. Yes, we're a day late because, a couple issues that happened on our usual recording day on Wednesdays that will be addressed here very momentarily. But there is nothing in this world, ladies and gentlemen, no weather conditions, no amount of travel by plane, boat, steam engine. I don't care. We are going to be on once a week, every single week, unless we take a break. But aside from that, we will be a consistent force here. And of course, on the Off the Ball Network Twitter page and our YouTube channel as well. It is myself, Iceman, coming at you guys live, as always, with my partner in crime. I call this man Mr. Nationwide because one week he'll be in Texas, one week he'll be in Ohio, the next week he's going to be in St. Louis. He may be in Alaska right now for all I know. My guy, the Don, James Barcia. James, where the heck are you, man?
I'm actually in the great state of the Hoosier State, Indiana. I actually had the privilege of meeting. I just had dinner with him. That's actually why we were a little late. Sorry, fans, but just had dinner with the one, the only, Stu Brooking from Morning Brew with Stu. Shout out to one of our friends of the show and network. But yeah, man, I'm in Indiana. It's an interesting state, to say the least, for, Jersey boy like myself. But other than that, man, I'm excited for today, Jer. We got a lot of transaction talk, as you said earlier. That's exactly what this episode is. It's just going to be a whole bunch of transactions. It's a little slow on the baseball side. So, we're going to talk more hockey. And we got a couple bruises other to talk about, but we'll figure it out, Jer. Regardless of that, though, man, how was your day? I heard you had a crazy day as well.
Yeah, I had a crazy day. So I handled a couple personal things. I had to handle some personal stuff in the morning. Got to keep it X-Files, 0 Dark 30 on some of the news right now. But I also, for lunch, me and two friends of mine, we went out for a early birthday dinner for one of my friends because he has a hectic schedule. We all have hectic schedules, let's be honest, though. So we had to meet up early here for a birthday lunch for him. But it was a fun time for anyone that lives in NYC that watches us. Dallas barbecue. Oh, you gotta go to it. You gotta go to one of those places because, man, I'm still stuffed, James. I ate it over 5 hours ago, and I'm still stuffed. I told you before air, I had like a super light dinner, like literally nothing, because I'm still full from lunch. I'll probably still be good by breakfast tomorrow morning. That's how good the food was. So I had a good time. You had a good time. But Good Eats Boys is what is running this show, and I think that's probably that should be the episode title that you put on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But irregardless, like you said, it is a very transaction-heavy episode of B&B today. We're going to be talking about some recent transactions in the world of sports, hockey being the biggest one. So, James, I'm not going to beat around the bush any longer, as I tend to do sometimes for padding the stats for runtime. Let's get straight to it. Jack Eichel was finally traded a day or two after last week's podcast was recorded. Like, even when we change the date of recording, James, the big stuff always happens after we go. It annoys me sometimes, but nonetheless, Jack Eichel was finally traded from that dumpster fire of an organization known as the Buffalo Sabres to the Las Vegas Golden Knights, James's team. The trade, as announced last week, it was Jack Eichel to the Vegas Golden Knights for in exchange for Peyton Krebs, Alex Tuch, a first-round pick this year and a second-round pick next year. Conditions on those picks, very simple conditions that I'll get into in a moment's time. But the man himself, Jack Eichel, is now going to Vegas. This gives Vegas the first ever true bona fide number one center they've had in franchise history. This is something that Vegas has been looking to address for a while. The Vegas center core has always been fine. It's always been solid, but it's never been great. The center core was a big reason why they've lost each of the last two conference finals appearances they've made, particularly against Montreal. When you think about how Montreal ran with Nick Suzuki and Philippe Danault back in the playoffs, those two handling the top six with a plum. And so Vegas has always needed help down the middle, and now they finally get it when he is back and healthy again, because Jack Eichel, I believe, he has undergone the procedure. Well, he's definitely undergone the procedure ever since he got traded to Vegas, because they gave the okay for him and his team to do so, which is what a good organization does, allowing their guys to get treatment when they're hurt. Oh, what a concept. Gary Bettman's probably frowning about that. But, the other way on this deal, the Buffalo Sabres, so they got back Peyton Krebs, a former first-round pick of the Vegas Golden Knights, another first rounder that Vegas has essentially traded with him. We'll get into the numbers on that in a moment here. But he gets traded along with Alex Tuch, a Buffalo born and bred boy who actually tweeted that it was a dream come true to play for the Buffalo Sabres now. good for him. I'm not going to make a joke about that. When you get to play for your hometown team, I think it's a very special thing that not everyone gets a chance to do. So congrats to Alex Tuck that he's going to play in front of his friends and family on a very consistent basis now, essentially. And the first and second rounder, like I said, conditional based. Essentially, if Vegas first round pick this season is a top 10 pick, then the next year's first rounder will belong to Buffalo. Vegas would keep this year's first rounder, and the second rounder would also be pushed back a year if Vegas's pick ends up in the top 10 this year. So it really all depends on how Vegas does. If their pick is 10 and above, they keep this year, and each pick gets pushed back. If it's outside the top 10, then Buffalo gets the picks as presently constituted. But interesting package, to say the least. I will give my thoughts on it in a few moments here, but as always, I want to throw it to my guy, James. James, your reaction to this deal, being a Vegas Golden Knights fan, and with everything you've learned about the Eichel situation, because you, like many people that watch our show, have learned about this situation through all the updates that we've been talking about. What was your immediate reaction when you saw me share this to you? Because I'm almost certain when you first saw this, it was me sharing you the news.
Whoa. Let's clear this up. I told you first. I texted you. I go to Vegas. Yeah, let's clear this up first. I was breaking the news here, all right? I was always bombing you. But I was excited, obviously, because you always talk about the great talent Eichel is. And honestly, you're always happy when you see an all-star MVP caliber player get out of a bad franchise such as Buffalo. Not only for the fact that let's be honest, when a franchise is bad, sometimes you like enjoying the fact they're bad. It's something about it. It's like, it's not my team. Good thing it's that team over there. Keep that far away over there. But the fact that you got an MVP caliber player there, it's like Mike Trout on the LA Angels. Man hasn't seen the playoffs in God knows how long, and it's what are we going to do over there? You feel terrible. It's talent wasting away. Is because you won't know that talent could be in the history books. So aside from the fact that you got that talent outside into a great franchise, that's not even just me being biased, let's be honest, is a great franchise that got good structure over there. And there were, like you said, Jerk, there were plenty already looking towards a Stanley Cup run, as always. Now you added their weakest part in Jack Eichel, who, when healthy, he is arguably the best player in the league. You know what? Let me live my dream, Jerk. All right, this is my rant. But regardless, either way, if not a best player, you're having a top 5, guaranteed top 10 player. And that was what they needed. And that's going to take them that extra step because their defense was looking good. Sometimes it wasn't reliable in the playoffs, but it was enough to hold them down. And their offense was laying them down more often than not. Now, hopefully, when he comes up healthy, you get a nice little power jump and, who knows how far they could take it.
Very excellent point you bring up there, I got to say. So to the Jack Eichel trade, not the best player in the game, Connor McDavid would like to have a word with you, James. He says, hold my beer while he goes past 4 players and scores a goal. But Jack Eichel, when healthy, has proven that he can be a top 10 player in the game. His time in Buffalo, he's put up a 80-point season. Once he went over 80 points, and then another one where he was very close to 80. The 2019-2020 season, he was on pace for a pretty good year, I believe. I think just under point per game, if, immediate math off the top of my head isn't mistaken. And this season, he would have been fine if he had been healthy. But the problem was, of course, he was getting hurt, and he was not going to play through injury. I think what you say is the biggest thing at the end of the day. When a guy like Jack Eichel leaves, it's almost going to be a rejuvenation for him. And I think now that he's finally able to get the procedure he wanted, now him and his team can make a more direct path to coming back. I think this is what makes the deal worth it for Vegas, all things considered. I'm not going to argue in any way that it was a bad deal for Vegas. I think what you gave up for what you could potentially get, which is the first line center for your franchise for a decade to come, you do that deal every single time. I do not care what the situation is. If you can get a bona fide, this isn't questionable. This isn't a guy towards the end of his prime. This is a bona fide top 10 player in the game when healthy, top 3, 4 at his position at the spot you've needed since your franchise first started. No question, Vegas, this was the deal to make. What I want to get into now, James, is the idea that Buffalo, and did they get the most back? Because remember, during the offseason, we always talked about this. I think when Logan was on in one of the previous appearances he was here, we spoke briefly about it, that Buffalo was wanting a haul for Jack Eichel, quote unquote. They wanted at least 4, I believe the wording was 4 assets back that were equivalent to first round value in a trade. And when you look at this deal, they obviously didn't get that. You get Peyton Krebs, who was a former first round pick, right? So boom, check that off the list. You got a first round pick back. Check that off. You got a second rounder back. Not a first rounder, but with the way the NHL has worked and how all the first and second rounders are, how every draft pick is on the same entry level contract of 3 years, that's not bad. And then you get Alex Tuch back, who he's performed well. He's going to throw the body around, he's going to get you some goals, but not exactly a first round caliber, asset. So my question, James, and my consideration is this, is that with the Eichel trade happening, the moment it happened, and this happens with all other big deals, is that everyone's going to start to talk about, who else was involved. And allegedly, Carolina and Calgary were involved in this deal in the latter stages of it, more so with the Calgary Flames. And I remember from the Calgary Flames deal that I saw briefly, it was Matthew Tkachuk, at least one first round pick, if not two, but it was Tkachuk, a first, a second, and maybe one more thing that it's escaping me off the top of my head what it was. But I really have to question Buffalo now because they wanted 4 first-round assets back, and they didn't necessarily get that. And when I look at the Calgary offer, Matthew Tkachuk is the best player either team could have given, and yet they go with what Vegas had. So I really am curious about that. So ignoring the Vegas part from it, James, do you think Buffalo did get the most they could get for Eichel back? Or are they going to live to, I don't want to say regret, but are they going to look back at this deal and think we could have gotten more from a guy of this talent?
That's a tricky question, Jerg, because when it comes to a moment like this where you have Eichel, who he's sitting out of games because they're not allowing him to get the health checks he needed and surgery he needed to rehab from what the doctors he wanted. And then you never know, because the longer you wait, the more the asset depreciates, no matter what. Because realistically, Eichel it could have been time was helping his injury for real, and he could have just played like nothing, or it's more time he's off the ice. So yes, we could sit here and say they could have gotten a better package, as you said. They were looking for 4 first round caliber talent stock, however you want us to call it. But at the end of the day, were they really going to get it, or was that just them saying an unrealistic price? And the longer you waited, if the season kept going on, I think we're going to see, yes, this probably was a good deal for them. Could they have gotten more? Possibly, but you never want to. You take whatever deal you think is the best deal. You're not going to look back at it and go, oh, man, you don't cry over, spilt milk. Hindsight, would it look better? Yes, but at the end of the day, you got the deal you got. And you never know if that deal you took would have ended up still as a good deal. It's very tricky with these injured players, as I said, because there's always a question mark. No matter what deal you take, if you took enough or if you didn't take enough, because as I said, it's almost like Bitcoin, Jerg. The price just fluctuates with those injured players so much.
Nice reference right there by our financial guy, James Garcia. I definitely get the point. I think when it comes to injured players, it's always a tricky thing. And when it comes to players in general, when teams are trying to trade guys that they haven't necessarily done a good job of, building them up, Philadelphia, then it becomes an issue of you're expecting too much back when you're not helping the situation. So I think at the end of the day, I agree, teams sometimes do have to settle, but in the world of sports, it's always about maximizing value. And I'm very much a maximizing value kind of guy when it comes to looking at deals like this and how can we maximize our value the most. And while I personally actually like Peyton Krebs a lot. I think he's got really good potential for his NHL career. I was a big fan of him coming out of the draft, and I think it was a great get by Buffalo for their prospect system. The first round pick and the second round pick is nice. It's just when I hear Matthew Tkachuk was being offered by the Calgary Flames, that makes me, I got to raise my eyebrow there, because I'm a big believer Matthew Tkachuk is a very talented player, a 25 plus goal scorer, could probably score 30 goals on a consistent basis with everything put together. And if I hear that Calgary was offering him, I need to kind of raise an eyebrow at Kevin Adams and the Buffalo Sabres GM, especially because James, the reason why I think this is because this past summer, he actually had a pretty good offseason. He was able to dump Rasmus Ristolainen and actually got a first round pick back in a deal for him, which no one would have expected. He was able to trade Sam Reinhart for a first and a prospect, I believe, which again, it's a great deal on that end. I want to say there were one or two more deals that were made, but they're just escaping me off the top of my head. But all in all, Kevin Adams actually had a pretty good summer in terms of transactions. So when I think about the good deals he made recently, and Kevin Adams, a guy who a lot of people have been doubting as the GM of this team, saying that he's probably just the lame duck for the guy that's eventually going to overtake him. When he's making these good deals, it's like, okay, now, this isn't bad. Dude, does Buffalo have competence? in the general manager position. And then he makes the Jack Eichel deal. It's like, oh, well, I'll be. But I think you bring up a fair point, and I think that's what you're better interrupt me
Well,
with.
what makes you though? You got to ask yourself. I mean, these guys realistically, they know more than we know. They see
Right.
more things behind the scenes than we do. So, what was it that he saw about that deal that he didn't like? Maybe the player just didn't fit the philosophy that they're trying to run. Maybe it just wasn't his type of player. Maybe it was just something he knew. Hey, we're gonna have to pay this guy sooner than this guy if we take him, and that just doesn't work with the plan I have set forward. So, it's a bunch of other reasons why. Yes, this deal might have looked better, but if you have that one game plan, you got to stick to it. Even if, yes, an opportunity arises where you could get a player who overall might be better, but if you think you could get more of a ceiling out of these assets that you're grabbing, you got to go with that, I feel.
And that's one way to look at it. And hey, you might be right because Matthew Tkachuk, I believe, is due another contract extension a year or two from now. And Peyton Krebs, I believe, all 3 years on his entry level deal are still there, if not at least the last two. And you don't have to pay him $6+ million yet. Same with Alex Tuck. Alex Tuck is on a very manageable contract, so maybe that is the case. Although Buffalo's salary cap is not the issue because they have plenty of that, and they had to make another deal aside from the Vegas one to actually get back to the cap floor, so they wouldn't get penalized. Funny enough. I believe they made a trade with the New York Islanders, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, I'm not going to question it. But also, Kevin Adams is a guy who he deserves some questioning because while he did have a pretty good summer, at least I will grade him as having a pretty solid summer trade wise. This is still a guy who has been criticized during his tenure for having this job, and I think I'll say this: we're definitely going to have to look back at this trade 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, etc., to really see what Buffalo got back in this deal because now they just have to draft right and. Draft is kind of hit or miss with them. Okay, let me say this. They've drafted talented players, right? They drafted Jack Eichel. They drafted Rasmus Dahlin. They drafted Sam Reinhart. They've drafted these players. The problem is that everyone seems to be doing better when they leave Buffalo, man. So I don't know. Like it's a whole wait and see deal. And I can only imagine Rasmus Dahlin is counting the days when he can actually escape as well. So, Rasmus Dahlin, you're next. For your sake. But we're moving on from the hockey world where a very happy James has a nice shiny new toy that will be, playing on the ice eventually for the Vegas Golden Knights. I believe the initial reports I've seen is definitely after All-Star break, Eichel will be playing when. I'm not necessarily certain, but after then, he should be suiting up and he's going to look, just from the jersey edits, I know everyone gets edited, but Jack Eichel looks good in Vegas Gold, man. He looks clean with the Vegas Golden Knight jerseys on him.
Everybody looks clean in that jersey. It's a clean jersey.
It really is.
Wears you, not you wear the jersey.
Oh, now that life quotes right there. Life quotes say, look. What do they say? Bars look good, play good.
Look good, feel good, play good.
There we go.
Get paid good.
Yes, and that's Bar's philosophy. That's Bar's philosophy when we do the show. That's why he's the looks, and I'm part of the brain. But moving on from the NHL talk. Like we kind of said at the top, not a lot of baseball. The season just ended, and we've entertained some discussions, but nothing too concrete yet. We've had a couple interesting opt-outs. Castellanos from the Cincinnati Reds opted out of his deal, which was expected when he put up an NL MVP candidate caliber season like he did this year. The Dodgers may or may not be keeping Clayton Kershaw. He could be hitting free agency for the first time. We'll see. Wait and see there, obviously. But James, even though we don't have our bunts in the news this week, that doesn't mean that we're dry for news, so to speak, because there's another place we could get our transactions from, isn't there?
Of course, Jer. We are a multi-talented show over here. People forget back in our roots we were doing all 4 sports, but then we decided to focus it down a bit just to do the fans a service. But of course, here we are on our first baseball offseason and our young NHL season. So, we got to sprinkle in everyone's favorite sport. And we're not talking about baseball, sorry, but we are talking great old American football. And of course, that means we're talking a whole bunch of bruises. So, of course, let's just dive right into it. The biggest news, Jerk, I don't even know where to start because we got 2 breaking stories, but let's go with the first one that broke because we thought we were going to be here talking about trade destinations, landing places, and news broke out. Here we are. Odell Beckham. He made the decision quicker than the show could show. That's a good one. We're gonna have to cut that one out, Jerk. But he made a decision quicker than the show could appear. By the way, I'm on Central Time also. We didn't tell the fans this. There was some logistics planning that made this show ended up later, but regardless, Odell Beckham ended up 4 p.m. my time, I believe, 5 p.m. your time. Could be wrong. But he is now part of the Los Angeles Rams. Jerg, what's your initial reaction to Odell being here? Yes, he is playing with overall better team. Do you think this is really the ideal spot for him? If so, why? And if so, why not?
I was intrigued, right? Because I had convinced myself that he was going to go to Kansas City because the reports were that he was waiting till after Sunday to make his move, right? And when I thought about that, I thought about, oh, Kansas City is facing the Vegas Raiders this Sunday. Let's see one more good game out of Vegas, and Odell goes there. And I was thinking in my head, like just imagining the offense. Tyreek Hill is going to be streaking down the sideline. Travis Kelce is going to be in the slot. And then you have OBJ in the intermediate routes of the field. You now have 3 levels of the field, all with all pro caliber players there. And Odell, I think Odell would have actually helped. Like we always say that guys go in and they would help Kansas City. I think Odell actually would have made a difference because the Kansas City offense has been struggling for the last month at least. And it's because teams are starting to figure out if you play 2 safeties high on them, they're not going to take what the defense gives them. They're going to go for deep shots every time. That math changes when you add an Odell Beckham Jr. into the intermediate routes of the field. And now Tyreek Hill is getting the attention of both the safeties and the number 1 corner. Now it's going to be Odell with the number 2 corner and Travis Kelce with a linebacker he could probably just blaze by, right? So when all of that is considered, I truthfully believe that Odell would have made a difference in the Kansas City offense. I really do. But we'll never know that. Maybe in another universe, in a multiverse somewhere, past the stars. But now Odell could potentially make an impact on the Los Angeles Rams, and he is going to one of the most innovative minds in the NFL today. I think a lot of these innovative guys are on the West Coast, man. Kyle Shanahan in San Fran, and of course, the man, Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona. His offense is working in the NFL now. It's more Kyler than anything, but we're not going to get into that. And now Sean McVay, good old buddy Sean McVay running things in LA. A lot of people question him going into this season. I personally know a couple people that were like, is Sean McVay really that much of an offensive genius? Yes, he is. And if you need any more, proof of that, let the next 5, 6, 7 weeks be the case where Matthew Stafford now, he was so lost in Detroit. It was so cold there that Sean McVay said, come here. I'm not only going to give you a real team to play with. I'm not only going to be the best coach you've ever had. I'm going to give you Odell Beckham Jr. as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does. I think there's going to need to be an adjustment period. Odell's not going to drop 100 yards in his first game as a Ram because he needs to learn the Sean McVay offense. He's going to have to get used to the fact that Cooper Kupp has been the number 1 guy this season. And my God, Cooper Kupp has been phenomenal so far this season. Offensive player of the year, caliber season halfway through the year. But I think Odell in LA makes sense because I think some of the things I thought he could do for KC, he could potentially do for LA, but now Sean McVay is doing this. And Sean McVay is an offensive mastermind. You're telling me that Odell Beckham Jr. went from Baker Mayfield and Kevin Stefanski, all due respect, Kevin Stefanski, I know he's a pretty good offensive mind, but he went from those two to Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. That is the greatest birthday present of all time. Happy belated OBJ for that. It definitely shocked me. I was waiting for my food when it happened, so I was just like, oh, this is quite a thing. This is quite the appetizer before the main course, But yeah, I was shocked, but I think it's going to be a pretty good move for this LA team that I think it's the most obvious thing in the world, James, is that they're going all in.
Oh, of course. I mean, right, just weeks prior to this trade, right before the deadline, not trade, signing. It's so close to the deadline. It felt like trade. But right weeks before the trade deadline, you had them trade for Von Miller as well. They're just obviously they're pushing all their chips in this year and trying to go for it. Was it a good trade for the Rams? Yes, of course, because now you're adding a third talented wide receiver because, as you said, Cooper Kupp is just dominating. He is arguably right now the best wide receiver in the NFL for this season. I'm pretty sure he's leading the league in receiving yards. Correct me if I'm wrong. You have Rob Woods, who even in his Buffalo days, when he was there in the cold, just like Matthew Stafford was before he came to the Rams, Robert Woods was no joke. Then he came to the Rams and he finally got some eyes on him, and he's still playing great. Is he playing as great as he was a couple years ago? No, but that's because Matthew Stafford has taken a kin to Cooper Kupp. So now you're telling me you have Rob Woods running your deep routes. You have Cooper Kupp running whatever short intermediate route, and OBJ doing the same thing. You have a big play waiting to break out, and you have Darrell Henderson. Yes, for the Rams, this was a great trade. For OBJ personally, I don't think so. And honestly, that makes me start thinking the trade now that I said great, I want to say it was okay trade. I get why you made the trade. Obviously, talent wise, you're improving your team, but it is such a road. It's such a like not a roadblock, but you're throwing such a random in there that possibly you could be ruining the chemistry of your locker room. It's scary. You've seen them ruin 2 franchises already. And yes, a lot of people are saying it's not OBJ's fault this, and that's not OBJ's fault that. After a while, when is it his fault? Yes, we give Aaron Rodgers a lot of leeway whenever he makes mistakes, but at the same time, you start holding him accountable. It's just he has something to show for it, and OBJ hasn't had something to show for it in quite some time. So he brings up the main reason OBJ wanted to leave was for targets. He's not getting that there, hands down. Stafford and Cooper Kupp, they are the best buds ever right now. Cooper Kupp is losing 1, maybe 2 targets at most. Rob Woods, yes, he's going to lose maybe 2, 3. I don't even see him losing 4 because he's not even getting the same amount of targets like that himself. Van Jefferson is the one who's most likely going to lose all his targets, but at the same time, let's say that puts Odell at 5 targets. Is that going to be enough for him to not cause a ruckus like he has been already for years? I'm not one buying that. I was on the same camp as you where I thought Kansas City was the best spot for him to be because, yes, you have Travis Kelce and, yes, you have Tyreek Hill, but you don't have the same run game, and they're just so much more pass-heavy. Also, we've witnessed when Tyreek Hill has that second wide receiver, a Sammy Watkins or whoever it may be across from him, better than McCole Hardman, who the only reason they drafted him was because they didn't think they were signing Tyreek Hill. So they tried copying him.
Well, they thought they were going to lose Tyreek Hill.
Exactly. But then they said, you know what, let's keep him. So regardless, you need a good wide receiver across them. So I do agree with you. And I thought Vegas, forget the one more game. I thought they've shown enough with everything they've been through with Henry Ruggs, John Gruden. You had the people forget the whole I forget it was beginning of season or the preseason where they threw the party and a couple guys had to get the COVID fee, the penalty fee, and they had a quarantine as well. Oakland has a whole bunch of nonsense going on there right now. Are they still tied for the division? If not tied, they're second for the division. But regardless, with everything going down there, Derek Carr, let's be honest, he's having an MVP-like season. He's the only reason they are still pushing along. And you got to play with the talents of Darren Waller, who is arguably, besides Travis Kelce's number 2 receiving tight end in my eyes. And you have Hunter Renfrow, where, yes, he ain't the greatest wide receiver, but that's a good number 2, man. I love me some Hunter Renfrow. I think there was plenty of other options. Green Bay, you name it. Anywhere else, though, I feel like would have been a better option because he would have got the targets he was looking for. And I just believe that you got to hope that the leaders there, such as a Von Miller, but he's only been there for a couple seconds, just step up and tell Odell to shut up whenever he tries to start talking. That's the way I see it.
So I'm going to bite back on the Odell is ruining these franchises thing. Look, there are no 2 bits about it. That the Giants ruined that situation. He carried the carcass of Eli Manning in his first 3 years in the league. We saw Eli Manning off No. I don't care. I don't care.
You brought Lil Wayne on the interview, Jared. Why was Weezy there?
I don't care.
Why was Weezy? The people want to know.
That's a good question. That's actually, no, we need to do a deep dive. I think we need an off-the-ball network. We can't use 30 for 30, 40 for 40 when it comes to that. But irregardless, Eli Manning carcass had to be carried by OBJ. You saw in the stats off the field, Eli Manning's completion percentage, passing yards, passer rating, every positive passing metric was down when OBJ was off the field. You know what was up whenever Odell Beckham Jr. was not on the field? Interceptions. Like whenever Eli was not throwing it to OBJ, he looked like what he was becoming, an aging quarterback. And so Odell had to deal with that. There was no succession plan in New York. That's the one thing I'll always agree with you and Eli Manning. They screwed him over because they didn't have a real succession plan. They thought ending his streak for Geno Smith was the answer. I mean, my God, man. But there was none of that. We called him a issue off the field, despite the fact that there weren't compared to most guys, compared to Tyreek Hill, for example, or Henry Ruggs or Damon Arnett. He was doing nothing off the field to the level of these guys. He was just showing personality. which we kill athletes when they show personality. And then when they're cardboard cutouts, like certain other guys, we want them to show more. So what do we really want? Sports fans don't really know the answer to that. And then he goes to Cleveland, and all the off-field stuff disappears. You can't get him on the off-the-field stuff now. You can't complain about that because he did his job with limiting the off-the-field concerns, quote-unquote off-the-field concerns. And then it was on the field. And let's be real here. Baker Mayfield, while I think sometimes Mo, Steven, and the guys are a little bit too tough on Baker, I'll agree with this. Baker Mayfield throwing it to Odell Beckham Jr. was the equivalent of a 5-year-old trying to throw a football across the field. Is the most useless thing. You know how it's going to end. You're just smiling and being nice because you hope it works out for the kid at the end of the day. Baker Mayfield throwing it to OBJ, the quarterback rating for him was not good because he was not hitting Odell at all. He was not. Baker Mayfield throwing it to Odell Beckham Jr., it was one of the worst connections I've ever seen. And I had Verizon at one point in my life. Like, it's not good at all, man. It's just not good at all. So, hey, for me, Verizon didn't work out. I'm just saying. But when all things considered, that on-the-field issue, that was not Odell's fault. That was Baker being an incomplete, specifically incomplete, not good quarterback when throwing it to him, but yet he had the connection with everyone else. Everyone wants to point to OBJ, but you look at OBJ, he did everything we asked him to. He limited the off-the-field stuff. He started being quiet. He tried to be more of a leader. He was okay with Jarvis Landry. And we crucify him for it because he's not performing on the field. Why? Because now he has to deal with Baker Mayfield as his quarterback. So I'm not going to allow that to happen. And now he's going to go to the Rams. This is the best quarterback situation he's ever had. This is the best head coaching situation he's ever had. Yes, is Cooper Kupp the number one guy? For sure. But Odell, like we keep saying he doesn't understand the fact. Yes, Odell Beckham Jr. will understand that Cooper Kupp is the guy. And the whole he wanted to leave for targets thing, I'm pretty sure that's a veil of I don't want Baker Mayfield throwing me the ball anymore. If Matthew Stafford only throws him the ball 6 times a game, you want to know why Odell is going to be cool with it? Because he might catch 5 of them because they're actually going to be thrown within him. So, no, get out of here with that. You know, he ruined Cleveland, he ruined the Giants thing. No, that's on those 2 organizations.
Who's a better quarterback? Eli throwing to Odell or Baker Mayfield? You're gonna say Baker, so exactly my point.
No, Eli. I would argue Eli.
You are full of it. I know you are.
Ability-wise,
you know Eli. Baker's better.
No, we're not. No. We're not talking about ability. I just told you the stats. When Eli was throwing it to Baker, he
was a better quarterback.
When Eli was throwing it to OBJ, he looked better on the field. When Baker throws it to OBJ, he looked like a below-average quarterback, and that's not on Odell Beckham Jr. because half the time,
not on Odell Beckham Jr.
Because when you're throwing the ball 5 yards away from the guy, like what do you want him to do?
Yeah, there were some catchable balls Odell just didn't try and catch. Simple as that. It goes both ways. You gotta take a hit.
James.
Why is he on the field with a million watch? Whatever it was called. His first game in Cleveland. None of the off-the-field stuff. It was gone for like a couple of
Odell Beckham
weeks, and then they pop back up, Jerk. Stop making excuses for the kid, because when it happens again here, what's going to be the excuse then, huh? What's going to be the excuse?
He's not going to complain because when he gets his only 6 targets a game, he's going to get 5. Stop! Why are you focusing in on that? Why are you trying to deflect the conversation?
Who brings a rapper to insult their starting quarterback to an interview? Why was Weezy there?
Well, the answer to that is a skill position. Like that's the number one answer. Let's be real here. But probably Jalen Ramsey would have done that if he was still in Jacksonville, you know. But he probably would have had a case for that. Nonetheless, Odell in LA. I'm not saying he's gonna look like the way he did back in his rookie season for the rest of this year, because I don't think half a season is enough. I think we vastly overestimate the amount of preparation it takes to understand a playbook, to understand concepts, etc. So I don't think that's going to be fair. I'm not saying that. But I think Odell is going to find himself in a pretty good environment. Would I still have preferred Kansas City? Yes. And to your reason, I think it would have also benefited Tyreek Hill greatly, because Mecole Hardman has been terrible. It's not been good there. But Odell to LA will work, because we keep pointing to him as a head case. Can you explain to me the worst thing he ever did aside from kicking and then proposing to a kicking net? Like, if that's the worst thing we got on his resume, like why are we always going at the athletes that the worst thing on their resume is pittance compared to some of these other guys? I don't want to hear a word from the same Giants organization where their kicker was committing domestic violence at home and he wrote about it in a journal that he was abusing his. I don't want to hear that from the Giants when they allowed that to happen. I don't want to hear the Cleveland Browns situation. I don't. After how long? Like, come on now.
Days too long, but they caught him.
So don't give me the whole morals thing when your organization isn't exactly moral. And the Cleveland Browns and morality the last 20 years. Let's be real. Let's be real here. But no, we're pointing out, like we always point out off the field concerns with guys where their off the field concerns are 50-50 compared to everyone else. The worst thing we pinpoint on LeBron James is the decision. You know what the decision did? It raised $2.5 million bleeping dollars. Tell me the worst decision in your life, James. And did it raise $2.5 million for children? No? Okay. If you're telling me the worst off the field concern that Odell ever did was kick a kicking net, like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Well, you know what I gotta say to that, Jerk. What I think is it's crazy that later that afternoon, actually, we had breaking news that Cam got signed with the Carolina Panthers, and we're gonna stop bad-mouthing my New York Giants. And all right, no, serious notes. All right, you do bring up some valid points, Jerk. I will agree. I have no counterpoints. I think we move on to as the breaking news I did say. So back to where we were. Cam Newton signed with the Carolina Panthers earlier this afternoon. Another guy with quote unquote off the field troubles. Honestly, I know. Here's the difference. Here's the difference between the two.
I'm not criticizing you, by the way, with that. I'm just saying, like, in general, we throw that tag around way too much.
I don't think Cam has off the field. He just has some attitude, but, quarterbacks have I like some attitude of my players. Not OBJ amounts of attitude, but I like some attitude. But regardless, so Cam Newton signed back with the Panthers. It's funny because he's replacing his replacements, something like that. I saw the meme. But regardless, Jerk, I think it's a good walk down the sunset. I don't think it's anything big. Wow. Me personally, I think Cam is done. I love the guy, love the player. I hope he proves me wrong more than anything. I hope he shows it was just the COVID that held him back last year. But I got to say, from what I saw last year, even before the COVID, when people said he was looking hot, he wasn't looking too hot, in my opinion. He was looking like a quarterback who his main thing was the run game and him being able to move outside the pocket. And he looked like a quarterback who his main game was that, and that's it. He took one too many hits, and now he's looking stiff. He's looking not as quick. He's looking like he has to second-guess some of his moves because maybe he doesn't want to get hit anymore after being hit for, 12-plus years now, maybe I think it is. So I think it's a good swan song. I think the biggest thing about this is if Cam he doesn't have to do good. If he does average, maybe even slightly below average, he could possibly end up with another extra year in the contract. And I personally think it's the last we've seen of Sam Darnold. I unfortunately was part of the Sam Darnold fan club. I was hoping he was going to prove the Jets wrong and make them look stupid. And at first, for 4 games, it was looking like it. But the last, 5 games, it is looking like the complete opposite. You could make the argument that it's the fractured scapula that he had that was messing with his throws, but you saw some of the throws he was making. Those were decision mistakes. Those weren't injury mistakes. So hopefully Cam could bring a little spark into this team. He is a local legend there, obviously. He's a former MVP. Maybe he brings something to that locker room where they can make it work out. Plus, Matt Rule, he has a running quarterback. Matt Rule's a guy where you give him something, anything. You give him scraps of bread, he'll make a meal out of it somehow, So you hope that Matt Rule and Joe Brady could make this the second coming of Cam Newton. And honestly, it's the best weapons he's had in quite some time. If you get a healthy Christian McCaffrey, you get DJ Moore, you get Robbie Anderson. It's a good squad, man. I'm hoping he could do something with it. What are your thoughts? Do you think there's any chance of Cam actually not looking like his former self, but suitable enough to earn a second contract, if not with the Panthers, with another team?
I think there's a chance. I equate this to Blake Griffin and the NBA with the Nets, that this is the veteran who came off a big contract and needs to prove himself now, and he needs to play at a decent enough level. I do think COVID had a little bit to do with his decline in play with New England. I really do think it did. it's a case-by-case basis with guys, and I would argue not just COVID taking him off the field affecting his body, taking away reps for him to learn that Patriots playbook more. You can study the playbook as much as you want, but being able to be on the field, at least even for practice, getting to practice the plays, getting to, practice the commands, seeing the receivers running their routes, like in the formations, that's all so valuable that when you lose that, like it doesn't matter how much you read the playbook. Seeing it is getting a feel for it. So I think Cam's New England tenure was last season was cut too short, and I don't think he ever got a fair chance last year. This year, I think Belichick, kind of to what people were saying, cut Cam because he wanted to do him the favor of let Cam go out there and be able to just, go somewhere else to potentially start. And it's taken a little bit, but now him in Carolina, I think there's a chance it could work. I find it ironic that he's going back to this team where the coach, it was the same coach that, was there when he got cut. When Matt Rule first came in, he had conversations with Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly retired. He had conversations with Cam Newton. Cam Newton was going to be released. Like, it was the dismantling of the key pieces of the core that led the Carolina Panthers to that Super Bowl, those years ago when Cam Newton was the MVP of the league. I don't think in any way, shape, or form he'll be back to that level. I think we're long gone from that because the years of abuse his body took because he was bigger, faster, stronger than everyone, and he was officiated differently. Let's call it as it is. He was officiated differently than any other quarterback. The hits that would draw penalties on Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, when Cam would get those hits, the referees were telling him, "Oh, but you're bigger than them. You should take those hits. Stop crying." And that's one of the many reasons why I hate NFL officials. One of the many reasons, this past weekend included. But we're not going to talk about that because I don't want the show to go over an hour and a half. But I think it could work. I think Matt Rule is a solid offensive mind, but I think Joe Brady there helps. I think Cam Newton's definitely one of the more intriguing quarterbacks Joe Brady will have a chance to work with. His ability to still run, I think Cam can still run off a couple like 10, 15-yard carries here and there. Heck, if his body's right, who knows? He might run off like a 30-yard touchdown in one of these games. That's a wait and see type of deal. Especially like with Christian McCaffrey there, you can get a little bit creative with the running formations. Like, I think there's potential here that the Panthers can, like you said, I think it's a spark to the offense. It's going to make it a little bit more intriguing. They're not going to lay on the sword here and just let the season die. They're going to compete. They're going to try for it, and I think it's something that they need to do. By the way, to the joke that you were referring to earlier, it's not just that. The whole replacement thing of just starting. The Panthers are currently paying Cam Newton's replacement. They're paying Cam Newton's replacement, and now they're paying Cam Newton to replace his own replacement because they paid Teddy Bridgewater. Then they had to trade Teddy Bridgewater to Denver. They're still paying out some of that contract. Then they had to trade for Sam Darnold. They exercised the 5th-year option on him, so they're currently paying him, but this isn't the 5th-year option. Let me clarify that. They're paying him this year, the last year of his rookie deal, and now they're paying Cam Newton to take over for Sam Darnold, who took over for Teddy Bridgewater, who took over for Cam Newton. So everyone's getting money in Carolina, and I mean, hey, good. I'm all for it. I'm all for guys getting their money, for free, not free market economy, but it's a good thing to see guys, getting greens in their bank accounts. That's for certain. But yeah, I think the Cam Newton situation overall, I think he could definitely make things interesting, at least, make the Panthers more watchable. And hey, who knows, because their first game is going to be against the Arizona Cardinals, James. And that defense, they're going to get a couple days of practice here now against a running quarterback. They're going to have to deal with a running quarterback in Kyler Murray. Maybe, this was a heady play. Get the defense, at least a little bit prepared for Kyler Murray and that Cardinals team on Sunday. That could be some smart moves, three-dimensional chess by Matt Rule and the team. But in reality, I don't think this will do anything for their playoff odds. I think, like you said, Cam is done being a full-time starter consistently, but I do think this is his audition. The next, however long Sam Darnold was projected to be out for, this is Cam's audition to extend his career to be able to be a backup quarterback, which he shouldn't have to do. He's better than half the backup quarterbacks in the league, just on a pure talent perspective. Like, let's be real here. Cam Newton shouldn't have to audition, but with the way this league works, sometimes guys that don't need to prove themselves apparently have to prove themselves more often than not. So that's the situation that we have here.
Man, even if, let's just say he doesn't, and let's say he looks like he did last year, which is a poor quarterback. It's just nice to see him finishing and closing the chapter there of his career in Carolina. No matter how it ends up, you like seeing stories like that. So speaking of how ending chapters, that about just wraps it up for this week, Jerg. Man, it's as always a pleasure. I'm gonna tell folks, follow us, Twitter. I was about to say Snapchat again, Jerk. That's like the 4th week in a row I'm about to say Snapchat.
I think we need to have a discussion after this, James, and your Snapchat addiction.
I don't even have a Snapchat. That's what makes it worse. I don't even have one. But regardless, follow us. Apple, Spotify. It's Spotify. It gets me all tangled up. Apple, Spotify, Twitter, Instagram, Bunts and Bruises podcast, Bars Talks, Jerk K40. Please follow us more on the Bunts and Bruises. We finally started getting those numbers up, but we need to get them up higher, baby. Other than that, guys, you guys know exactly where to see us. Wednesday. So far, nothing on the books. You never know, though, Jerk. My schedule is always crazy. You might have to be the voice of God at some point soon. Who knows? But regardless, we are booked and ready to go for next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Possibly have a guest. Who knows? But either way, until then, guys, we'll see you. Peace.